You didn't choose Hogwarts. Nobody does, technically. The letter arrives, the name appears in the book, the place claims you before you have any framework for understanding what being claimed by a place means. But what you chose or what was chosen for you, or what emerged from the particular combination of who you were at 11 and what the sorting hat found when it rested on your head, that choice or that emergence was supposed to be permanent. One house, 7 years, the colors, the ghost, the common room, the table in the great hall. Identity assigned at the beginning and carried forward, accumulating history and loyalty, and the specific texture of belonging to something that shapes you whether you examine the shaping or not. This is not exactly what happened to you. What happened to you is harder to explain and more interesting. Not because you were transferred, not because the hat made a mistake, not because some administrative exception reorganized your student experience, but because Hogwarts, the actual Hogwarts, the living version, the castle that breathes and shifts, and has been accumulating the weight of 1,000 years of students and their urgencies, did something to you that it does to very few people who pass through it. It showed you all 4 philosophies from the inside, not as academic categories, not as rival teams, as ways of being in the world, experienced from sufficient proximity that the experiencing changed you in the specific, structural way that only being inside something can change you. You started somewhere. You were sorted. You had a house, and it was real, and what it gave you was genuinely yours. But the 7 years between the first night in the boats and the last time you walked through the gates were not a straight line through a single philosophy. They were a conversation between all 4, sometimes voluntary, sometimes forced, sometimes the result of friendships that crossed the boundaries the houses were designed to maintain, sometimes the result of crises that didn't respect those boundaries either. Courage is not only Gryffindor's. This is the first thing Hogwarts teaches you across 7 years if you pay the right kind of attention. Loyalty is not only Hufflepuff's. Wisdom is not only Ravenclaw's. Ambition is not only Slytherin's. These qualities were assigned to houses by 4 founders who had strong opinions and strong personalities and who built an institution in their own images, which means they built an institution with the limitations of those images built in. The sorting is real. The categories are real. The philosophies produce genuinely different things in the people who live inside them for 7 years. But you are not a category. You are a person. And people developed honestly across 7 years inside a place that is alive and paying attention tend to exceed the categories they were sorted into at 11 in ways that the categories themselves predicted but could not contain. This is the story of that exceeding. 6 parts, 4 philosophies, 2 things that none of the houses teach on their own, and what you carry out of the gates at the end, which is more than you brought in and different from anything the sorting had assigned. Part 1. The philosophy of courage. You learn courage before you learn what it costs. This is the Gryffindor sequence, and it is not exclusive to Gryffindor students. It is the sequence available to anyone who spends enough time in proximity to a house culture built around the primacy of action in the face of fear. The common room teaches it without teaching it, the way all strong cultures teach their central value, through story, through example, through the accumulated weight of what gets celebrated and what gets ignored. What gets celebrated in the Gryffindor philosophy is the charge, the visible act, the moment someone faces the thing that frightened them and moves toward it anyway. These stories circulate with the enthusiasm of a community that has decided this quality is the most important one, and the enthusiasm is genuine and the quality is real. And spending time inside this philosophy does something to how you relate to fear that nothing else produces so efficiently. You begin to move toward things before you finish deciding to. This sounds small. It is not small. Most of the time that people don't do the thing they needed to do, the failure occurs in the gap between deciding and doing. in the space where doubt accumulates, where the calculus of risk runs too long, where the moment passes. The Gryffindor philosophy collapses this gap. Not by eliminating doubt. Doubt is information, and eliminating it would be its own kind of damage. But by training the body to begin moving while the mind is still negotiating. You start. You adjust in motion. This is a physical skill as much as a psychological one, and it takes years to develop, and once developed, it does not fully go away. What you also learn from inside this philosophy is its specific blind spot. Courage without direction is momentum without a map. The Gryffindor philosophy is extraordinarily good at producing people who will go, and considerably less systematic about the question of where. The culture celebrates the going. The destination is assumed to be obvious, assumed to be right, assumed to align with the values the house carries without requiring the kind of sustained analytical attention that would slow the going down. When the destination is right, this produces heroes. When the destination is wrong, or when the situation is more complex than a single direction can navigate, this produces something else, the specific failure mode of people who are doing the brave thing in the wrong direction and cannot slow down enough to notice. You carry the courage forward. You carry the question about direction with it. Both are necessary for what comes next. Part 2. The philosophy of loyalty. Loyalty, from the outside, looks like the simplest of the four philosophies. It doesn't have the dramatic quality of courage or the intellectual sophistication of wisdom or the strategic complexity of ambition. It looks, to people who haven't lived inside it, like stubbornness wearing a more sympathetic name, like the refusal to reassess, dressed up as a virtue. This is the most common misreading of what Hufflepuff's central philosophy actually is and what it actually produces. And it persists because the people who hold it have not spent enough time inside the philosophy to understand what it feels like from the inside. From the inside, loyalty is the most structurally demanding of the four philosophies. Courage asks you to act despite fear. Wisdom asks you to think clearly despite complexity. Ambition asks you to pursue despite resistance. Loyalty asks you to continue, to remain, to show up, to be consistently present for something or someone. Despite the absence of the external rewards that make continuing easy. Despite disappointment. Despite the evidence that the thing you're loyal to is imperfect. Despite the availability of better options that would require you to leave. Loyalty without the option to leave is not loyalty. It is captivity. Real loyalty, the Hufflepuff version, is chosen repeatedly against real alternatives because the commitment itself is considered more valuable than the optimization it forecloses. You learn this by being inside it, not by observing it. Observation of loyalty misses the essential quality, which is the experience of continuing when continuing is hard, and the specific thing that experience builds in a person over time. What it builds is a relationship with consistency that the other philosophies don't systematically develop. You become someone who finishes things, who is present at the end as well as the beginning, who can be relied upon in the specific, mundane, unglamorous way that reliability requires, not in the crisis, where adrenaline and stakes make showing up relatively easy, but in the long middle, where showing up is simply what you do. What the loyalty philosophy does not give you, what you notice from inside it, with the accumulated perspective of having also lived inside courage, is momentum. Loyalty is the philosophy of staying, and staying requires something to stay for. And the question of what is worth your loyalty is not one the philosophy itself answers. It cultivates the capacity for commitment. It does not always develop the judgment about what to commit to. These two things require each other, and neither produces the other on its own. You carry both the staying and the question about what deserves it. Part 5. The philosophy of ambition. Ambition, after courage and loyalty and wisdom, feels like the most honest of the four philosophies. Not because it is the most virtuous. It isn't. And it doesn't claim to be, which is where the honesty lives. The other three philosophies carry their values as ideals. Courage as the thing you aspire toward, loyalty as the commitment you honor, wisdom as the quality you cultivate. Ambition is different. Ambition is simply the acknowledgement that you want something, that there is a direction you are moving in, a version of the future you are working toward, a gap between where you are and where you intend to be that you are actively, deliberately, structurally closing. This acknowledgement, after years inside philosophies that are organized around values rather than desires, is startling in its clarity. You want things. This is the simple fact that the Slytherin philosophy surfaces with a directness that the other three philosophies don't. Not wanting in the ambient, unexamined sense. The wanting that lives in the background of any life and influences decisions without being named. Wanting as a conscious, acknowledged, strategically relevant fact. What do you want? What are you willing to do to get it? What are you not willing to do? And why? And what does that tell you about the actual hierarchy of your values rather than the stated one? What ambition adds to the accumulated philosophies of courage, loyalty, and wisdom is self-direction. The capacity to look at what you want and construct a path toward it using everything the other philosophies have developed. The courage to act, the loyalty to commit, the wisdom to evaluate. Without ambition, the other three philosophies are responses to situations. With it, they become instruments of intention. What you learn from inside Slytherin's philosophy, from genuine proximity to the organizing logic of a house built around the strategic pursuit of goals, is that ambition is not dark. It is neutral. The darkness or otherwise of it is entirely a function of what it is pointed at and what it considers acceptable collateral. The philosophy cultivates the instrument. The question of how to aim it is the one you bring to it from outside. You bring courage, loyalty, and wisdom. They are, it turns out, exactly what ambition needs. Part 6. What no house teaches alone. You leave Hogwarts carrying 4 philosophies and one understanding that none of them produced individually. The understanding is this: the 4 are not alternatives. They were never alternatives. The sorting made them feel like alternatives, like a person is primarily one thing, or should be, like the categories are boundaries rather than emphases, like choosing to be brave means choosing not to be cunning, like loyalty and wisdom are fundamentally incompatible orientations rather than qualities that require each other to be fully themselves. They require each other. This is what 7 years inside all 4 philosophies teaches, that 7 years inside any one of them cannot. Courage without loyalty charges into things alone and burns. Loyalty without courage stays long after staying has stopped serving anything. Wisdom without ambition understands everything and changes nothing. Ambition without wisdom pursues with precision in the wrong direction and arrives efficiently at the wrong destination. Each philosophy contains, in its most characteristic failure mode, the precise absence of a quality that one of the other 3 provides. You carry all 4 now. Not equally. The one you were sorted into first runs deepest, has the most history, shaped the earliest versions of the reflexes you operate from. But the others are present, genuinely present, not as intellectual positions, but as lived orientations, built from proximity and experience and the specific education that only being inside something produces. What Hogwarts did to you across 7 years, if you move through it with your eyes open and your willingness to be changed intact, is not give you a house. Houses are given in the first 5 minutes. What Hogwarts does across 7 years to the people who let it is give you a self that is larger than any single house's philosophy could contain. The Sorting Hat knew what you were at 11. One thing, primarily, with the others present in lower concentrations. What you are at 17 is harder to sort, not because you've become confused, because you've become complete. The castle received you as a category. It returns you as a person. The gates open. You walk through them carrying everything. And the 7 years behind you, the courage and the loyalty and the conflict between them and the wisdom and the ambition and the understanding that emerged from all 4, settle into the shape of someone who was never going to fit in a single house for long, who needed all of them, who has all of them now, who is finally, fully, irreversibly ready to use them.